All right, let's dive right in. Welcome everyone to today's explainer. If you're a networking professional who's spent years, maybe even decades, mastering Cisco IOS, you've built up an incredible amount of muscle memory. Your fingers just know what to type. But what happens when you suddenly find yourself staring at a Junos OS prompt for the very first time? Well, today we're going to look at exactly how we can translate all that hard-earned Cisco knowledge directly into Junos OS. Because, let's be honest, learning a new command line interface can really feel like trying to speak a brand new language. It's totally normal to feel a bit intimidated. But here's the secret. While the vocabulary might change, the underlying grammar, the core networking principles of routing, switching, and packet forwarding that you already know remains exactly the same. So let's explore how we map those Cisco commands you know by heart over to their Junos OS equivalents. Here is our roadmap for this explainer. We'll start with a welcome to Junos OS. Look at the architecture, dive into basic command translations, cover interfaces and routing mappings, touch on troubleshooting and operations, and wrap up with mastering your new CLI. Let's get to it. Okay, Section 1. Welcome to Junos OS, a new way to navigate. Now, the very first noticeable difference you'll encounter is how Junos handles configuration changes. This is honestly one of the biggest mental hurdles for transitioning engineers, the commit command. In Cisco IOS, when you enter a command, it usually takes effect immediately, right? And then you eventually save it with write memory. Well, Junos uses a candidate configuration model. You can make all the changes you want, but absolutely none of them impact the live network until you type commit. It's this fantastic safety net that stops half-finished configurations from causing sudden, unexpected network outages. Moving on to Section 2, the Junos architecture, modular versus monolithic. Before we get into the heavy command mapping, we really need to understand why Junos behaves the way it does. We're moving from a traditionally monolithic design to a highly modular one. Notice how each module, whether that's the routing protocol daemon or the management interface, runs in its own protected memory space. In a monolithic OS, a weird bug in a minor routing process could potentially crash your entire system. But here, if the OSPF crashes, no big deal. It doesn't take down the whole router. It just independently restarts that specific module. That's exactly how Junos delivers such incredible high availability. Section 3 is where the rubber meets the road. Basic command translations, your networking Rosetta Stone. So we're going to start mapping your daily Cisco vocabulary directly over to Junos syntax. Looking at this cheat sheet of fundamental commands, notice how moving from operational mode to configuration mode goes from configure terminal in Cisco to simply configure in Junos. Pretty straightforward. But what if you want to set a host name? In Cisco, it's just hostname name. But Junos uses a really organized hierarchy-based syntax, set system hostname. You're literally telling the OS exactly where in the system hierarchy that piece of configuration belongs. Now, what's really interesting here is how we check our active configuration. We all do this constantly, right? In Cisco, you're typing show running config. In Junos, it's just show configuration. It accomplishes the exact same goal, letting you see what's currently governing the device, just with a slightly more streamlined keyword. Oh, and here is a critical one. If you want a quick, summarized status of all your interfaces, your Cisco muscle memory is going to scream show IP interface brief. But when you're sitting at a Junos terminal, you'll want to type show interfaces terse. Seriously, burn this one into your memory. It is an everyday command that will instantly make you feel at home in your new environment by giving you that quick snapshot of exactly what is up and what is down. All right, on to Section 4, interfaces and routing mappings, building the network. Once you know those basics, it's time to actually build the network by configuring your interfaces. Setting an IP address is a really great example of that strict Junos hierarchy we talked about. In Cisco, you'd go into the interface and just type IP address. Junos, on the other hand, is wonderfully precise. First, you edit the interface. Then, you set interface unit 0, family inet address. Now, you might be wondering why unit 0? Well, Junos requires logical units for interfaces, which gives you immense flexibility, like creating multiple logical subinterfaces on a single physical port. And family inet? That simply tells the router we're talking about IPv4. When we see how this builds out into broader routing protocols, those complex tasks translate quite seamlessly. Checking your BGP neighbors, Cisco's show IP BGP neighbors becomes a much cleaner show BGP neighbor. Setting up an access list, Cisco uses access list deny, whereas Junos uses its powerful firewall family filter hierarchy. The underlying logic of packet filtering is identical, Junos just organizes it into incredibly clear, readable terms like from source address and then discard. So a crucial point here is really highlighted when we look at static routing. Instead of floating randomly in the global configuration like Cisco's IP route, Junos strictly groups its static routing under a specific folder, so to speak. You type set routing-options static route. This makes reading a Junos configuration incredibly intuitive, because absolutely every routing-related setting lives logically right under routing-options.
Of course, building the network means absolutely nothing if you can't test it. When checking standard operational discovery tools, checking the ARP table with show IP ARP is simplified down to just show ARP. And if you want to ping a host quickly without waiting a full second between each packet, instead of configuring a specialized Cisco ping, in Junos you just add the word rapid, so ping address rapid. It is all about efficiency.
Section 5. Troubleshooting and Operations. Keeping the lights on. When things go wrong, or honestly when you're just doing routine health checks, checking your hardware inventory in Cisco with show inventory becomes show chassis hardware in Junos. Checking your system uptime, show clock in Cisco, translates really nicely to show system uptime. It's actually highly intuitive once you realize Junos separates the physical chassis commands from the logical system commands.
Now, if you're ever on a call with a vendor support team, you know they are going to ask for a full system snapshot. In the Cisco world, this is the famous show tech support. When you are operating a Junos device, the exact equivalent you need to run is request support information. This single command compiles your configs, your logs, and your hardware details into one giant, comprehensive output for them.
And what about live monitoring? If you're hunting down a live issue, you are probably used to typing terminal monitor in iOS to stream syslog messages directly to your screen. In Junos, the command is beautifully literal. Monitor start messages. This tails the live system log file directly to your terminal. When you're done, you simply type monitor stop, and that brings us perfectly into the powerful safeguards built right into this system. And finally, Section 6, Mastering Your New CLI, the safety net. Take a look at the mapped rollback and history functions here. First off, in Cisco, if you want to remove an IP address, you use the no keyword, like no IP address. Junos just uses the delete keyword. But the real magic is in the command history. Junos actually maintains a database of previously committed versions of your software configuration, right there locally on the device. This brings us to what is literally the crown jewel of the Junos CLI. If you apply a configuration in Cisco that accidentally breaks routing, reverting it can be an absolute nightmare unless you've set up configure replace archives perfectly ahead of time. In Junos, because of that candidate configuration model we discussed at the start, the system automatically saves your past commit. So if you mess up, you literally just type rollback followed by a number, like rollback 1 to go to the previous state, and then hit commit. Boom, you're back online. It is an absolute lifesaver. This quote from the Junos documentation really summarizes everything perfectly. This operating system was designed from the ground up to do things differently. Yes, the vocabulary changes, and sure, learning the new hierarchy takes a little bit of practice, but the core networking logic you already possess, that remains entirely intact, and it's now bolstered by an operating system designed for unmatched availability and flexibility. You aren't starting from scratch here. You're simply translating your hard-earned expertise into a more structured, much safer environment. So, knowing that your foundational knowledge maps perfectly over, how will you leverage the modular safety, those awesome rollback features, and the clean hierarchy of Junos OS in your next big network deployment? Something to think about. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and happy configuring.